to this computer. Hi, I'm Dr. Nikita Vizniak here with the amazing
Dr. Catherine Chung.
and today we are going to be taking you through the ketogenic diet, key things you should know, key things that you should understand. And of course, Dr. Chung is a contributor to this textbook right here, Evidence-Informed Nutrition, 3 Easy Steps to Feeling Better. You can do it.
We can help.
And we're eating for optimal health here is what we're looking at. So evidence-informed content and of course, ketogenic diet right here on page 76. So if we click to that, Dr. Chung, what do I need to know about the ketogenic diet?
The ketogenic diet is pretty much very low on carbohydrates. Another name can just be a very low carb diet where you're aiming for about 5 to 10%. And then it is moderate protein. So about 35% of your diet will be protein based. And then it is moderate to high on fats as well, which is about 55 to 65%. Now, a lot of the times when you think keto, you're like, oh, it's actually high protein, high fats, and low carbs, but it's actually moderate proteins. And that's a key thing to know because if you go super high on your proteins, your kidneys will not love you for it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be more metabolic demand on the kidneys and other organ systems as well. And even the cost physically of having that much high protein intake is going to be difficult for you to find, right? So basic ways, how am I going to increase good quality fats? And that's the key thing here where I think a lot of people get this diet wrong is they pick poor quality fats. What am I going to be looking for my good quality fats?
Good quality fats, usually you don't want to focus too much on animal-based ones. You want to focus on more plant-based ones. And the reason, and if you do choose animal-based ones, you want them organically and organic and grass-fed. And the reason for that is just because fat holds on to a lot of hormones. They can hold on to a lot of pollutants and toxins as well.
Absolutely.
So the cleaner it is, the better it is that you aren't putting that into your body. And that's why the plant-based fats, you're looking at cacao butter, or you're looking at what's it called, fermented veg. Like those things are really a lot healthier, I suppose, because there's less pollutants in them.
For sure. And then, I mean, the other thing would be, of course, you're not going to go wrong with avocado for sure. Anything avocado based, even certain coconut oils. Again, the less processing is going to be key. But the foundational thing here is plant forward, exactly like you're saying, Dr. Chung, trying to avoid those animal fats, especially if they are of lower quality. If you can find more natural sourced as well, that's going to be better off for you too, right?
Yep,
now,
correct.
back onto these proteins, what am I going to be doing for those proteins for that approximately 35%-ish of my diet?
Again, it's going to be organic, grass-fed. The cleaner the protein, the better. You might want to have them, well, you can have them not as lean because you want that fat content in it anyways. But unfortunately, you can't necessarily lean too much on the plant-based proteins. It's just because they're higher on the carbs, right? So it would be hard to balance those two, which is why we always highlight more of the animal-based proteins. But I know it doesn't get eaten very often, but I do like the organ meats part of it because they naturally are lower on fats, but they have all the nutrients that you would need. And we'll talk about this later in terms of the side effects of the ketogenic diet. And a lot of the side effects are low on electrolytes and certain nutrients.
Well, I'll tell you what I remember because we've done a number of dissections together and we do an organic whole food pigs dissection. And Dr. Chung is always there. Give me some of the organs, give me some of the liver, whatever else it is. And she makes a fantastic pate and other things out of that as well.
It's so good.
It is. The other thing that I'll make a comment on here too is just because I have a connection, my brother-in-law owns a meat market that supplies most of the lower mainland Greek restaurants. And if you can have natural source lamb from New Zealand, which is basically hormone-free, everything free, they're as organic as you can get. That is a good quality, excellent tasting source of animal protein if it's something that you feel like you can fit in to your diet and budget. All right, now what about this dairy choices right here? Because a lot of people forget that dairy is a good source of fats potentially as well, if it's a good quality dairy.
Yep, exactly. Good quality dairy. I have no qualms around dairy itself, so long as your body can handle it, right? Not everyone has to be dairy free, but as long as you're not pooping your pants, you can have your dairy.
Yeah, there you go. All right, and then we've got the veggies that we should be aware of, and we kind of already talked about this. Again, plant forward diet is what we're looking for here, right? As much as possible.
Exactly.
All right. So back onto the diet itself, when we're looking at this, well, maybe we should just say this really quick too, as I'm going through the book. We should maybe say foods to avoid. This is a foundational thing to make sure you're staying in that 5 to 10% range of carbohydrate content.
Yep, exactly. And you can see on that list, a lot of them are going to be simple starches or simple carbs, all the quote unquote fun stuff. So we got breads, crackers, cookies, all that stuff, right? It's just
Hmm.
because they naturally will be high in sugar, but they're also going to be mostly made out of simple carbohydrates,
Hmm.
which will be broken down to sugar really easily too. And we have to remember that carbohydrates aren't just found in grains or in baked goods or in starches. They are found in a lot of veg as well. So when you're looking at that left-hand corner, those veg that are listed as okay veg, they do have a lot of carbohydrates in them as well. Especially when you're looking at asparagus, you're looking at beans. You can look at the kale. They all do have a lot of carbohydrates there. So
Hmm.
save it for nutrient dense carbs, and then you don't lean too much on the empty carbs essentially, which are
Yeah.
the foods to avoid section.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So what is ketosis then? Because that's what the name ketogenic diet actually comes from. What does ketosis mean?
Ketosis means that you're shifting the balance of how much ketones are being produced in your body. So when you do a very low carb or a low sugar diet, and then you have higher proteins and fats, it shifts the use of energy from focusing on using sugar as a fuel source, as using ketones, which are just water soluble molecules in your body, as a fuel source instead. So a lot of the times, and you'll see that in the last sentence there, where a lot of the thought was sugar is the main fuel source for your brain, but it has been shown that it isn't the only fuel source. It's just the easiest one that your brain will focus on, but it
Hmm.
can use ketones as a way to drive certain pathways and just keep you moving forward and fuel your body.
Yeah, and I think one key thing we should say for people, why is this diet so high in fat? It's higher in fat because ketones come from the breakdown of fat,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, on a basic level. So we have three types of ketones right here that you can look at. What are these superpowers that ketones allow you to do, Dr. Chung?
Well, this kind of gives the background of why fat or a higher good quality fat in general is really good for brain stuff, and it's just because, like Dr. Nick was saying, fats break down into ketones, and then when you use these ketones, it actually helps down-regulate pro-inflammatory
Hmm.
cytokines. So inflammation is really bad for the brain. So as we decrease the brain and nourish it with these ketones and with the fat, it actually has shown to help reduce Alzheimer's risk
Yeah.
and dementia risk, or even the severity of those conditions as well.
Hmm. That's an important thing for people to realize. You're not curing conditions, but you may be delaying the onset or lowering the severity of these conditions is one of the key things you're getting from this diet, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the biggest thing is, and that's the last point on that ketone superpowers, is they help increase mitochondria biogenesis in the brain specifically. But if you think of just mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell and where
Hmm.
a lot of the mitochondria will be, it's also in the heart as well. It's where muscle is. And what's your most heavy using muscle is going to be your heart, right?
Hmm.
So that's why you'll see it as a positive effect on cardiovascular as well, and just mitochondrial what's it called? Mitochondrial pathways in general. And that's
Hmm.
why they use ketones as a ATP source,
Hmm.
exactly, just based on mitochondria itself.
Excellent. Yeah. So again, powerhouse of the cells, supporting that
Mm-hmm.
process as well, potentially. It not doesn't just have to be glucose based, right? Okay, so both of us see patients. We're dealing with patients who are wanting this ketogenic diet. What are some of the key things that I need to do to get started on this ketogenic diet? Other than the first point, clearing out my pantry of any high sugar or refined carbohydrate foods, which are going to be of risk, because especially as your body goes to the first part of this diet, which I've tried this diet before, you are in a sugar craving mode. So if you see anything that has sweets, like even raisins, I'm looking at bananas, all kinds of stuff like that I know that has lots of sugar content, your body is looking for that right off the bat, right?
100%. I mean, out of sight, out of mind in those instances, right?
Yep,
There's going to be
absolutely.
lots of temptation in the
Hmm.
outside world. So if you don't tempt yourself inside your own home, that would be the best approach. I also love to do some type of preliminary blood work for a lot of my patients. Having a marker of where you started, and then when you do ketogenic diet for say 3 months, get another blood panel done. see the difference, see what has changed. That's a great motivating factor for a lot of people because they can see black and white how things have changed internally for them. You can't
And
really, feel that your cholesterol decreased.
absolutely. And
So,
exactly, you can't feel that. But the other thing is that gives you hard, firm data that you can track over time to see results and changes in someone's body. And it is highly motivating for patients. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and that's where the
Mhm.
glucometer comes in and the ketone strips and stuff, just to keep you on track. It gives you something, a goal, right? Every time you have some type of number goal, it helps a lot. And again, motivation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the key things, we'll talk about some of the side effects right here, but we can see it stay hydrated with mineral rich water right here. Some of the
Mhm.
side effects associated with this diet, dehydration is going to be a big one, nausea, brain fog. I don't know, Dr. Chung, if you want to add a little bit more to these.
Yeah, so a lot of them, the nausea is and the brain fog is just because your brain, you're switching from its fuel source of predominantly sugar to something that takes a lot more effort to break down, which is proteins and fats.
Hmm.
And it's just a new fuel source, ketones. So you're gonna have to give your brain a little bit, or your body a little bit of a transition time. The nausea is just because you're not used to having to break down so much fat and protein. So then your body needs to create more digestive enzymes. That's why sometimes we're like, hey, just take some digestive enzymes for a small period of time, or even use like apple cider vinegar, bitters, something
Hmm.
like that to help break down the protein and fat first until your body gets used to it. And
Hmm.
then the brain fog is something where you kind of have to push through as well. So that's why I recommend a lot of patients where there is what's the word, a scale of how much carbs that you want. It's 5 to 10%. Start at 10% and then slowly decrease, so then you can help transition your brain away from the sugary glucose fuel source, and then
Hmm.
it gets just used to the ketones, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to start 100% at the jump.
Exactly, exactly. And that's one of the best advice I think you've given all the way through all these diet modules that we're doing together here is gradual transitional changes rather than cold turkey start this up, because it becomes very difficult. It's the exact same thing if you're taking somebody to the gym. You don't go and work out your hardest the first time at the gym because you're going to have a reactive spasms and issues in your body and delayed on, and you might even hurt yourself potentially with it too, right? So same issues with these diets when you go full blast into them, 0 to 100, and you don't take the time to actually slowly adapt. I think a lot of people don't realize this either. Your body prefers to run on glucose, but it is always remodeling and breaking down fats and remodeling and breaking down proteins. So there's naturally a little bit of that always running in the background as well, right?
Hmm.
And here with this ketogenic diet, we're just trying to force that ketogenesis as more of the upfront fuel source, basically.
Yeah.
Which also brings us to our next point when we're looking at things like muscle cramps, fatigue, heart palpitations, and constipation, especially this last one, constipation. That's a big one right there for patients who are on this diet, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and all of these are based on mineral depletion, right?
Hmm.
Muscle cramps is going to be magnesium depletion, heart palpitations, very similar as well. Fatigue, so they're all demineralization of your body. Essentially, you're not getting that in. And
Yeah.
then the constipation is also due to reduction in fiber. Naturally, you're going to have a
Hmm.
reduction in fiber with this diet, but also the dehydration aspect of things that we'd already talked about. If you're not hydrating your poops, then it's going to be a little bit harder to poop.
There you go. That's what it's all about, right? Once a day keeps the doctor away. All right.
Yeah.
So, therapeutic uses of the ketogenic diet. There's some pretty good research here for multiple uses, but why don't you run us through a couple of these, especially like the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's? Those are big conditions that potentially have long-term benefit with a keto diet.
Yeah, totally. And it's because it's so high in fat. So throughout all of these diets that we chatted about, especially with the swank diet as well, it is higher, or you're controlling essentially fat and the quality of fat. And the reason for its application in a lot of neurological or brain conditions is because it reduces inflammation, and specifically for the keto diet it helps reduce the total brain amyloid beta levels, essentially,
Hmm.
which create those plaques, which create and worsen the Alzheimer's
The
disease
symptoms,
progression,
yeah, the
essentially,
symptoms that you're
right?
going to see, yeah.
Yeah. So then that's why the keto works so well for brain conditions. But naturally, we've already talked about how it's going to be very low in sugar because it's going to be very low in carbohydrates. And that's why you see its positive effect in the cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes as well, weight loss. Like you'll see it across the board because it naturally is low in sugar.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things too. Like a lot of these diets, if you really stick to them, they do wind up reducing sugar intake and they have multifactorial effects that if you just lost the weight, you would see these benefits across multiple conditions as well, right? Or decrease your calorie intake or had better quality calorie intake, so not so many empty calories, right?
Hmm.
All right. And then just finishing up this diet really quick, looking at supplementation, because that'll be one of the key things. We don't usually recommend that much supplementation, but in this diet, there might be avenues for it. But I thought before we did this interview, you had a couple of good points that you were making about it.
Yeah, so because there's such a high risk of a reduction in mineral and vitamin nutrients, supplementation is where a lot of people end up leaning on. I try to get my patients to get it through their diet as much as possible. So instead of, say, taking a magnesium supplement and a magnesium electrolytes, then you could always just do a use Himalayan salt and things that naturally have magnesium in them and make more of a salt water drink rather
Mhm.
than leaning on the magnesium itself. So again, trying to get things from your diet as well. The MCT oil, another one where it is made out of coconuts, so you could have it through what's it called? I do like MCT because it is a little bit more natural in that regard, and I don't really
Mhm.
see it as a supplementation. It's kind of like avocado oil for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but again, like with digestive enzymes, you could always just use vinegar instead, or bitters, so dandelion or things that are bitter melon itself, to increase that digestive process and get the digestive process going, essentially, right?
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So just as a quick summary, here's what our plate would look like if you were following a ketogenic diet. So key thing again, you are avoiding processed refined carbohydrates whenever you can. And a lot of people forget the carbohydrate content naturally occurring in foods as well, like is potato, apples, peaches, bananas, you name the fruit, it's probably got a very high sugar content. But guess what? So do peppers and so do other foods potentially as well. But if you have them in a small 5% amount, you're probably better off. Your proteins, of course, are going to be lean, natural source proteins whenever possible. You can have higher fat content, but it would still have to be a natural source if you can, grass fed, like you were saying earlier, Dr. Chung, which was excellent. And what do I need to know about my fats, Dr. Chung? What should I be taking there?
75% fat, so it's going to be quite high on the fats. And remember, you want them to be as clean as possible. So organic, grass-fed, if you choose to be mammal-based, or fish-based, or plant-based as well. It's going to be the healthier they are, the cleaner they are, the more sustainable this diet will be.
Yep.
And I think we can go through all these different diets. And the thing that I always kind of want to bring up or move forward is whatever diet works for you will work. All these diets are very similar, right? So the
Mhm.
Mediterranean diet, yeah, it's like very plant forward, but it is quite fat forward and it is really low in sugar and carbohydrates as well, right? And you'll see that across the board with many other diets too. So very similar across the board, just different rules in terms of how you want to approach it and live your life. So you got
Mhm.
to pick one that gives you that happiness at the end of the day. Because if it stresses you out and you're not happy, I feel like that has more detrimental effect to your body than it does
Yes.
if you were just following something that you actually enjoyed. But yeah, maybe you're eating 15% carbohydrates instead of 5%.
Yeah, and you find your own balance and homeostasis within that, right? And everybody's going to be a little bit different. If people wanted to, there are some great documentaries on the history of sugar, how we would have found it naturally in the old world, and how it has evolved with sugar beets in ancient Europe and old honey and everything like this. But we have never had so much sugar readily available as we do right now in the environment, and that's probably one of the biggest issues you're seeing as a commonality, just like you were saying, Dr. Chung, for all of these diets right here, reducing that
Mhm.
sugar, finding alternate fuel sources or more natural evolutionary based fuel sources that you might have run on as well, right?
Yep,
Just on
exactly.
our own personal notes on the ketogenic diet, we were talking about this before we started the interview too. I'm not the biggest fan. Like if a patient asks about it, then yes, they can go ahead and do it if they have a specific goal that they want to accomplish. And like you were saying, maybe it works for them. But I feel like there are better choices than the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the times the keto diet is used as a weight loss diet
Hmm.
essentially, right? Because you're just, you're reducing those carbs so much, which is great short term. I
Yes.
find if it's weight
Yes.
loss with patients that are, say, my menopausal patients, the patients that have hormone issues, this might not be the best one. Yeah, you might drop like a buttload of weight, but once you bring back in those carbs because it's not sustainable for them, then it's
Exactly.
just going to all come back. But also, carbs are not always that evil, and we've talked about this in a different video as well, where you need carbs to produce your hormones. So if you have
Hmm.
hormonal issues and you drop your hormone or you drop your carbs down, it's not going to help the root cause of your weight issues, which is actually the hormonal imbalance and
For
anything
sure,
else.
exactly. And then, so exactly, again, basic medicine should be looking for the root cause, treating the symptoms, but looking for the root cause. But I see that exact same thing. So many people go on the keto diet, they drop weight like crazy, then they go back to their regular eating habits,
Yeah.
and the weight all comes, and you just see this yo-yo progression, and really not sustainable, not, not desirable long term for most people.
Yep, exactly.
All right, Dr. Chung, thank you so much for your time and wisdom on this. It's been a
Yeah.
fantastic session with you, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for
Bye,
having me.
everybody.
Bye.